Hey guys, another one take review. Today I wanted to talk about the latest, or I guess I should say first, Kaizo Slumber album, the Kaizo Manifesto. Now technically Kaizo Slumber isn't exactly new, is a new name actually from the previously established and somewhat well-known Ace Tantina. Ace Tantina last year just retired that name with the release of the record Carmen Winstead, and also last year was the release of the Ace Tantina album Temple of Null, which I won't say it made a splash or that it got super popular, but it did resonate with some listeners in certain corners of the internet. I'll say that. So I do think that there was at least some level of hype building around this, even if Ace Tantino was a very vaporwave slash underground electronic sort of record, where or artist I should say, whereas Kaizo Slumber was or is a very hardcore breaks kind of based name and artist. But even with that difference in subgenre, I do think that there was at least a reasonable amount of hype building around the release of the Kaizo Manifesto. First and foremost, though, I do want to say that I think the Kaizo Manifesto is one of those albums that you just need to experience on a what I would refer to as a surface level listen, as in not going trying to go beyond and deeply analyze the record. I mean, there are some interesting futuristic themes here, some very nostalgic vibes overall that I'll talk about in a minute. But I think at its core, this is nothing more than just a really fun, enjoyable hardcore breaks album. And I know that will kind of cause some people to turn their head away from this record and go towards other more progressive, artsy sort of electronic records. But I don't think there's anything wrong with this. It's a really fun album, and I think, in my opinion at least, that's what it's supposed to be taken for. Of course, the artist themselves is the person that you should probably actually go to for that, but in the case of just my opinion alone, I think that this should just be listened as nothing more than the Hardcore Breaks record. A lot of previously established fans might not like that, especially considering the fact that, like I said before, Ace Tantina was a very vaporwave-like project, and well, vaporwave is about as far away as you can get from hardcore breaks and related subgenres. But still, I feel like this is an album that should just be taken for what it is, and what it is just a generally really good time. The Kaizo Manifesto isn't a one-dimensional record by any means, though. I don't want to be misconstrued and have anyone watching this think that I think this is a one direction or a one-dimensional bland record. It's not. It's an interesting album. I just don't think that it's necessarily a groundbreaking record or anything like that. Of course, it is hard to do anything very innovative or groundbreaking within such a specific subgenre and niche in this case, hardcore breaks. And that's not just for hardcore breaks as a subgenre, but just really when you're getting to something so particular in terms of sound, it can be difficult to kind of break out of that box. But there's nothing wrong with staying in that box, and this is what this album does. Like I said, the Kaizo Manifesto also does have some very futuristic sci-fi influenced tones and themes overall. It's sort of the only arcing theme over the course of the record. And I will say it does make it stand out a little bit compared to other albums. I'm not going to say it makes it some sort of a unique listening experience that you won't find anywhere else. Like I said, it's hard to kind of break out of the confinements that are given to you in this specific of a subgenre. But it does stand out. It could be just because of the fact that it does do those futuristic themes quite well, in my opinion. Plus, you've also got songs on here like A Conflict Between Earth Mother and the Techno Gaia, and The Techno Gaia Accelerates Technology in You. And those are just some of the coolest song titles ever. So, I mean, even if you're not interested in this because it sounds like a basic hardcore breaks album, you should probably check it out anyway. I mean, come on, you can't pass up an album with those song titles. Those are just genius. I will say that the Kaizo Manifesto is pretty short, all things considered. I guess that probably shouldn't be a surprise, especially considering the days of Ace Tantino weren't exactly multi-part suites or anything like that. Those were, generally speaking, very short albums as well, barely cracking the 30 or 40-minute marks often. But at the same time, I do feel like this record, this is going to sound strange, but not so much in terms of actual album length, but more so in terms of song length, is where this record's biggest fault is. There are just some really interesting songs here. You've got songs like Cyberpunks Aren't Dead and Human, A Cosmic Horror, that just really have potential to be absolutely amazing tracks and highlights on the album, but they just end too quickly for them to actually be highlights of the album. And they have so much potential, but they just don't achieve their maximum potential because of the short length. And then you've got other songs on here that probably shouldn't even be on there in the first place, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in terms of individual song length, I would like to see the Kaizo Manifesto actually extend those slightly. Now, while I would have liked to have seen individual songs get lengthened, I would have also liked to have seen the entire album's length overall get cut down at least slightly. There are just a few tracks here that, while decent or good, there's nothing bad on here at all. But there are songs that are just good or just decent that don't really have any potential, in my personal opinion, at least. Of course, I could be proven completely wrong by that. It only takes an incredibly talented artist to remix something into something that achieves much more than the original piece seemed that it could have. And obviously, Kaizo Slumber is an incredibly talented artist, as we've seen with the better moments on this album, as well as the previous greatness of Ace Tantina. But there are just some songs here that I feel like serve no purpose and kind of just repeat themselves and sort of drag the album down. I mean, this album barely cracks 30 minutes, but it ends up feeling like a 40 or 45-minute album, and that's no big deal because 45 minutes is generally pretty standard length for any album, no matter what genre you're in, as long as you're not going to, like, progressive metal or anything like that. It's pretty standard length, 40 or 45 minutes, but at the same time, I'm going into a 30 or so minute long album, and I want to feel like I just listened to it for 30 minutes, not for 40 or 45 minutes. And I do feel like that it sort of drags things down, kind of. It just sort of repeats itself on certain tracks, and it's frustrating because for every track that's either really great or good with the potential to be great, there is another song that's just sort of like, okay, this exists, this is good for what it is, I guess. It's just, I think this record could have been a lot better overall if certain songs were completely just cut off and a selection of cherry picked songs were sort of lengthened to achieve something greater than just repeating the same concept for a couple of minutes and then moving on to the next song. I feel like that really could have elevated the Kaizo Manifesto and Kaizo Slumber's debut to the next level. So, in conclusion, the Kaizo Manifesto is a pretty strong debut for the Kaizo Slumber name. I can't say that it's a great album necessarily. I also can't really say that expectations were met in terms of the inevitable quality comparison to Ace Tantina, even though there's the massive difference in subgenre. But I can't say either of those factors were met, but I can say that this album is a good time, even if it could have been much more than it actually is. Nonetheless, it's still fun, it's still enjoyable, and it's violently danceable. So all good on all fronts, really, except the fact that there was a potential here that was obviously unreached. And with that being said, I think this album deserves 3.5 stars out of 5. And with that, yeah, this is a good album. I think it could have been a lot better. I think it could have achieved a lot more than it did, especially with the artist's previous track record, under a different name, of course, of achieving a lot of really great work. But even still, fun, enjoyable record. There's nothing wrong with it, and I do recommend it. So 3.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this review. So I will see you guys in the next one.